We're going to go ahead and look at some really cool text effects that we can create using many of the principles that we've covered up until this point, and also sharing a couple of new things with you. In addition to being able to do most of these with text, you can also do them on other elements, which should give you some ideas of some ways that you can get really creative with your animations. The first thing that we're going to start off with is a way that we can reveal text or any other element. I've already made a new composition, and my composition is 4 seconds long. We'll start off by making some text. I'm going to click with my text tool and we'll just go ahead and type reveal. You can go ahead and choose a text and specify any of the text related settings that you would like to use. With my text element selected, I'm going to open my Align palette, and then I will just align the text to the center of my composition. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a solid. So I'm going to come to Layer, New, Solid, and we'll pick a color for our solid. And then what we're going to do with the solid selected is we're going to select the solid, open the property for scaling, and we want to scale this down so that the solid is just a little bit taller than our text. Then I'm going to unproportionately scale my text, and we're going to change the width of our solid so that it is about 1. So essentially we just have a thick line on our screen. I'll go ahead and hold down my Shift key and we'll move the solid so that it appears to the left of the text. Now what we want to do is we want to make this solid pop up and appear. So what I'll do is I'll move my playback head out 4 frames. I'm just going to type 4 to advance it 4 frames. We're going to set a keyframe for scaling, and we'll go ahead and set the width to 2 at this point. I'm going to come back to keyframe 1, and we're going to set a keyframe for scaling, and we're going to change the X value to 0. Then I'm going to go ahead and move my playback head out to 6. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to change the scaling down to 1. Now that we have our bar scaling onto place, we're going to add the property of position. I'll click Shift P to open position. Let's move our playback head out about 15 frames or half a second. I'm going to turn on keyframing for position, and then I will advance my playback head out 1 second. So I'm just going to write plus 100 to go out 1 second. We'll click, hold, and drag our bar and place it to the right of the text. And as you can see now, the bar is going to appear and then it's going to slide over to the right side of our frame. Finally, I'm going to create keyframes so that the bar is going to disappear. So once it gets to the right, we'll wait about 10 frames. Then I'll go ahead and I'll set a keyframe for scaling. I'm going to move out about 4 or 5 frames, and we're going to go ahead and just have the scaling disappear. I'm going to go ahead and change the X value to 0 and the Y value, let's reduce this about half. I'll select all of the keyframes that we've created, and I'm going to click F9 to create easing, and let's just go ahead and play our animation. Perfect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the text not appear until the bar slides over it. So to do this, I'm going to use a mask. I'll go ahead and put my playback head at the location right before the bar hits the text. I'm going to make sure my text layer is selected, and we'll go ahead and use our rectangle tool, and we're just going to draw a rectangle over the text. Now this obviously is the text at its revealed state, so let's go ahead and turn on keyframing for the mask path. Then I'm going to move my playback head out until the bar has gone across the text, and we'll create another keyframe. Now we'll go back to the first keyframe that we specified, and we're going to move the mask path. To do this, I'm going to use my selection tool. I'll grab the mask path, and we'll just pull it over to the left. Let's go ahead and change our work area, and if we play the animation now, these are our results. So as you can see, this is a way in which you can make text reveal itself, and it looks as if the bar is creating the text for us. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this particular composition. I'll select everything on the composition and delete it. And now we'll move on to the next example. For this example, we are going to have text appear as if it's being drawn in via a stroke. So I'm going to go ahead and use my type tool, and I'll type some text on the stage. I'll go ahead and select a font family. I'm going to specify a size for my text. And once again, I want to place the text in the middle of the screen, so I'll use my Align palette to do that. Let's make the font a little bit bigger. The next thing that I'm going to do is we're going to actually convert our text from live text into a shape. We do that by right-clicking on the text layer, going to Create, and choosing Create Shapes from Text. This will automatically convert our text into a shape layer. At this point, you can go ahead and select your text with your pen tool, and you would have the ability to reshape any of the points on any of the text elements. So this in itself is kind of a cool thing you can do, since these are all properties that we potentially could animate. You can see if I open up the ocean layer, the contents are specified by letter, and we have all of these different options available. However, for this example, we are going to be doing something else. The other thing that I want to bring your attention to is we actually have two layers. We have the ocean outline, which is the outlined version of the text, and then we have the original text layer, which is our live text. So by default, After Effects is going to create both the shape outlines and leave your original text within your composition, although it will turn off the visibility for the original text. I'm going to select the outlined text, and now that we have converted the text to a shape, I can go ahead and treat this as I would a normal shape. So I'm going to remove the fill, and I'm going to add a stroke. And we'll go ahead and make our stroke width about 5. Let's change the color of our stroke, and we'll just use a really light blue like so. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the ocean outline layer. I'm going to come to Contents and I'll select Add. We're going to add our trim paths. So I'm going to turn on trim paths, and you can see this property has now been added to the ocean outline layer in my composition. Let's move our playback head back to the beginning. We'll turn on keyframing for end, and I'm going to just extend my work area out to 4 seconds. Then I'm going to move my playback head out in time, and we'll just go out about 2 seconds, and we're going to set another keyframe for end. I'll go back to my original keyframe, and let's change the end value to 0. By doing this, you can see that After Effects is going to draw in the text like so. Now to make this a little bit more visually interesting, I'm going to add easing to these keyframes. I'll open up my graph editor, and we're going to select the points on either side of the graph and drag them towards the center. This will ensure that our animation is a little bit more visually interesting. So let's go ahead and deselect everything. We'll play our animation, and you can see that the ocean text draws onto the screen, and it starts slow and then gets really fast. The final thing that I'm going to do for this particular example is I'll select the outlines, I'll click U just so I know where my keyframes are, and then I'm going to move my playback head to the position at where all of the letters are just about filled. We're going to go to the ocean layer, and we're going to animate opacity. Let's go ahead and let's change the fill color of our text. I'm going to lock the outlines so I don't accidentally select them. I'll double click on my text, and then I'm going to come to the fill color, and we're just going to select a slightly darker shade of blue. I'm then going to animate the opacity, so I'll click T to open the property of opacity, and I'm going to set keyframing. We'll change the value down to 0, and then I'm going to move out about 15 or 20 frames, and I'm going to change opacity to 100. And once again, let's add easing. I'll use the keyboard shortcut of F9, and I'm going to open the graph editor and just create a similar sort of movement with the graph editor so that we get a more interesting type of animation. Let's go ahead and move our work area so that it encompasses the text. I'll rewind to the beginning and play the animation for you. And as you can see, we get a really cool animation of the text being created on the fly. And then of course we're filling in the fill color once the strokes have been created. Let's go ahead and create a new composition. We're going to call this one Bounce. And I'll use the same settings that I was using previously. I'm going to go ahead and create some text. We'll write the word bounce. Let's pick our font, and we'll use our line palette to center this to the middle of the composition. We'll go ahead and we'll open up the text layer. To the right of text, we're going to choose animate, and we're going to select position. This is going to add the animator 1 property, and this includes something called a range selector. I'm going to go down to the range selector. We'll twirl this open, and we're going to go down to advanced, and we're going to open this, and I'm just going to give a little bit more real estate to my timeline so we can see this. And under advanced, we're going to be working with the shape setting. We're going to change this from square to ramp up. Now what we'll do is we're going to go down to position inside of the animator, which is right here. I'm going to pull down the Y position, and we're going to increase that quite a bit. Let's just make that so it's right at the bottom of our composition window. It's fine if a couple of the letters are hanging outside of our composition. I'll just make this 500 so we have a nice round number to work with, but it doesn't totally matter what the number is. We just want to pull the position down. And because we're using the ramp up shape, it's going to allow us to control the position in a unique way. We're basically able to control the position of each letter uniquely. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go to our range selector, and we're going to change the offset value. We'll go ahead and we'll set the offset. If we increase this, you can see that the numbers come up, and if we decrease this, they all come down. So we want to start with the offset at -100. I'm going to keyframe this, so my playback head is already at keyframe 1. I'll turn on keyframing for the offset, and then we'll just move this playback head out in time, and let's move it to about 2 seconds. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the offset so that it is at 100. So I'll just change that. And if we go ahead and play this, you can see that the numbers are going to slowly move up in a sequential way. Then we'll select these offset keyframes. We're going to add our easing property. So I'll right click and choose Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. And if we play the animation one more time, you'll see that the animation is just a little bit smoother. Then, in order to get the text to look like it's coming into place, not necessarily coming from the bottom of the screen, I'm going to make sure that the text layer is selected. We'll use the rectangle tool, and we're just going to make a mask that covers the text. If we play the animation now, you'll see that the letters are just going to slowly appear within the middle portion of the screen. So we're just isolating that animation to only occur in that one section of the composition. Now what we'll do is we're going to add another animator property. So I'm going to go ahead and just twirl up animator, and to the right of animator 1, I'm going to click add, and we're going to add the property of rotation. Under our animator, we now have properties for both position and rotation. The range selector is going to affect both of these properties. So what we'll do here is we'll go ahead, and if we just experiment around a little bit with the rotation, let's place these into frame. You can see if we play the animation now, the letters are going to kind of like twirl into place. And for the sake of this example, I'm just going to add the mask back in. So I'm just going to delete the mask just so you can more easily see what's happening. If we play this, you can see how these things are really like not just rotating in, but they're really like twirling around several times. And that's because I made the rotation 1 plus 111 degrees. So if we increase this value to, let's say, 6, they're really gonna like somersault into place and kind of go a little crazy. So let's bring this back down to 1, and maybe this number can just be like 180. So it'll be a rotation and a half is how they're gonna kind of come into frame. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna keyframe this. So at keyframe 1, I'm going to add the rotation, and then I'll go ahead and go to 2 seconds out, and we're just going to reduce the value down to 0. So at this point, if we scrub through, you're going to see how they're going to kind of like somersault up to view. So in order to actually see this, we probably aren't going to end up using our mask after all. And let's add a little bit of easing to these. So I'll go ahead and select these. We'll add our easing, and let's just take a quick look. So you can see how these just kind of like somersault in, and not so much bouncing, but they're more somersaulting. If we want more of a bounce, then we could start to experiment around a little bit more with our position properties. We had set the position property to 500, but we could go ahead and augment this and make it a little bit more significant. You can see that we can really start to kind of create some unique sorts of animations in regards to how the text is going to appear onto the composition. So instead of just fading in or sliding in, we really have a lot of different ways in which we can uniquely control the elements. And of course, you can combine these with different things. You can add different animators and use the range selector. If we experiment around with our start and ending, we can even get a little bit more creative with some of these things. So if I go ahead and, affect start, you can see how some of the letters maybe aren't going to be quite as affected. And if we affect end, then it's going to, again, not have all of the letters be affected in the same way. You can't break any of these things. Feel free to experiment around with them, and if you don't like what happens, just undo, or you could even just delete the animator if you're not keen on what's happening. We'll just add our bounce composition to our composition folder, and let's create one more new composition. And this one is going to be a kind of reverberating type of effect. So I'm just going to call this reverb. And we'll use the same settings that we've been working on. We'll create a new text layer. I'm going to center the text on my composition. So I'll use my align palette to do that. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and open up rotation, just the standard rotation property. I'm going to set a keyframe at frame 1. And let's go ahead and set the rotation to maybe like -20. So we'll just rotate a little bit. Then I'm going to move out about 2 seconds, and I'm going to change this rotation to +20. So we're just going to kind of create like a little seesaw type of animation like so. And I'm going to Option or Alt click on my stopwatch, which is going to open up my expression editor. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to type loop out, open parentheses, and then inside of the parentheses, inside of quotes, we're going to write ping pong. And if we go ahead and play our animation now, you're going to see that it's just going to continually reverb. And let's actually have this happen a little faster. I'll reduce this down so it happens within 1 second. But if we play the animation, you can see that it's just going to continually play the animation over and over again. So using the expressions is a great way that you can eliminate the need of having to add a bunch of extra keyframes, and you can have something, in this case, cycle over and over again. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of easing to our keyframes. So I'll select these and we'll just add our easy ease. I'm using keyboard shortcut of F9. So that's just going to smooth this out a little bit, makes it look a little bit more like a seesaw. And then finally, we're going to incorporate an effect. So I'm going to go into my effect and preset area, and the effect that we want is called echo. This is under the time setting right here. So if we come into time, we have a bunch of different effects, but we're going to be using the echo effect. I'm going to drag this to my reverb text, which is going to open up my effect controls. And you can already see that we get a little bit of a change that's happening here. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to set the number of echoes. So if I increase this, you can see how I'm able to create more copies, more echoes of this type of effect. So by default, that was just set to 1, which almost looks a little bit more like a drop shadow, but we're going to increase this number. So let's set this number to 20. And then what we're going to do is we're going to experiment around a little bit with the decay. So the decay is how fast the echo, the copy, is going to dissipate. So I think maybe something around like 0.6 looks kind of cool. And if we play our animation now, check it out. You can see that it's still moving in the same way, but we get this really cool kind of trail of where it was before. And clearly you can control a lot of different things on these things. These things are all keyframeable too. And if you open them up, they have sliders, or you can just plug in the values. So you can experiment with that. Like if we increase this a bunch, it's going to take a second to render. This green bar is our render bar right here. When After Effects is working, it's going to play a little bit slower, but as soon as the entire thing becomes green, it's going to play in real time. And now you can see we get like a lot more of those kind of like trails that we were seeing before. So, you know, feel free to experiment around and find a solution that's going to work. But these are pretty easy things that you can do, and you get a lot of bang for your buck, right? This is really cool, and we can literally create it in just a matter of minutes. Have fun with these and feel free to combine them and get creative. But this is a great way that you can enhance the use of text or other elements inside of After Effects.